Well, I'm just curious as to why there wouldn't, with something as big as this, and potentially this is the biggest corruption scandal in British sport, which is a thought, and yet the SPL deem themselves fit to investigate themselves.
Well, I think you're calling it potentially the biggest corruption case. At this stage, there's been no wrongdoing proven. There is an investigation going on.
But you accept the potential. Potentially, if guilty, there's no question this is the biggest corruption scandal in British sport.
There is no wrongdoing, as I said, at the moment, and there is nothing yet that has been established as far as the club registering players without providing the appropriate documentation. So I think it would be wrong to jump to conclusions and even use words like corruption. There are a series of issues here. There are some footballing matters which are being dealt with through the footballing authorities, and there are some tax matters which are being dealt with through HMRC, and there's a tax tribunal due to be heard, as I'm sure you're aware, in April.
I'm just wondering why at no stage anybody seemed, or perhaps they did, to think we need an independent body coming in. This is big, this is huge, potentially. We need somebody from the outside, or we're going to be simply accused of investigating ourselves.
Well, I think that might be one for you to ask the Scottish Premier League as far as their board.
Well, they appeal to you, so I'm asking you.
No, well, we, as you said, we are the right of appeal. So if the club is concerned with any punishment that it's been given, then they can choose to appeal to us. We, as a body, have the provision in our rules to carry out independent inquiries. Indeed, we did so very recently by appointing the Right Honourable Lord Nimmo Smith to carry out our own investigation into Rangers, and we're partway through disciplinary proceedings, and they will be heard on the 29th of March.
But did anybody at any stage at the SFA say to you, I have a concern that we need an independent body, that the SPL can't and shouldn't handle this?
Well, under the governance of football, the SPL run the competition and
I'm
manage the process.
I'm saying, did anybody come to you at any stage and say that to you?
No,
anybody?
No, they didn't. As far as the SPL's process is concerned, the SPL
Never.
run the rules of the Scottish Premier League, and they apply that. There are a whole host of people raising issues on internet sites and passing comments about various theories that they have about Scottish football, particularly in the west of Scotland. I think it's important to establish that governance of Scottish football is managed by the appropriate body, whether it's the Premier League, the Football League, or the overall governing body. So, as far as we're concerned, we let the Scottish Premier League manage their own rules, and if those rules are then broken and the club is charged, they have a right of appeal to us as the appellate body.
Let's talk about Craig White. Presumably, when Craig White was mooted as coming in as the new owner for the grand sum of £1 at Rangers Football Club, presumably the SFA took a keen interest in this and did some kind of due diligence on this man.
Well, we have, under our articles, Article 10.2, we have a process which sets out a number of criteria for what defines a fit and proper person within football. Now, as you know, we cannot stop people getting involved with a business, and we cannot stop people getting involved with a PLC. All we can stop them doing is having an involvement with football. So what we do as part of that process is we ask for a declaration from the directors of the club that they have a copy of the articles, that they've gone through the conditions and criteria within Article 10.2, and they've confirmed to us that they meet those criteria. If subsequently those criteria are breached, then of course we take appropriate action.
You keep quoting the rule book back to me. That's not what I'm asking you. I'm asking, did the SFA conduct any due diligence on this individual?
No, we asked for a self-declaration from the directors of the club and the individual himself.
Forgive me, but that sounds absolutely incredible. This was the biggest club in Scotland, which had been brought to its knees by a whole range of fiscal mismanagement, which is all on the record and proven. A new man comes in claiming all kinds of things, just like the previous man, and the SFA didn't check or do any due diligence whatsoever.
But that's part of the process of governing football.
That's not governing football. That's the exact opposite of governing football. That's running away from governing football.
No, if you let me finish my answer, what the point I'm about to make is that we govern the entire game from the top of the game down to grassroots. we have changes of directors, we have changes of ownership throughout the course of the year. I'm sure if we were to spend football's well-earned money on doing investigations into potentially every change of director, then there'd be a lot of unhappy chairmen out there.
You could have looked on Google for free.
Well, we rely on the club telling us that the articles have been complied with, and that is the process that we undertake.
This is extraordinary. I say to you again, you have years of fiscal mismanagement at Rangers Football Club. New man comes in, and you're telling me that nobody at the SFA so much as got onto Google to find out any background information? Nobody did anything? That's extraordinary.
Well, you refer to alleged years of financial mismanagement. I think it's important to separate out the previous regime at Rangers and the new owner.
Rangers was a mess financially. Everybody knew that.
But I think it's important in the case of the point you're raising regarding the fit and proper person test to separate out the previous regime from the new owner. The club was in the process of being sold. They were challenging a tax bill that had been challenged by HMRC, and the club had been sold to a new owner. That new owner had come in, he had purchased the club, the paperwork for that sale had gone through, and the club had complied with our articles of association. We run football, we're not the police, we don't govern transactions, we don't govern business, we run football, and we'd asked the club to declare whether or not that person was fit to hold a place in association football. They'd gone through the articles, they'd signed to say that they'd read those articles and that there'd been no breaches of any of the points set out there. That included whether the director had been disqualified. That wasn't disclosed to us. Indeed, it didn't come out until the BBC did their investigation back in October of last year.
So the BBC do due diligence on people like this, not the SFA?
No, as I said, I think it came out in October 2010, primarily as a result of a detailed investigation. We then have to respond to potential breaches of our articles, and we did that. We entered into dialogue with the solicitor who was acting for Mr. White, and we were in dialogue until February 2011 of this year when the club went into administration.
What I'm simply asking you to admit here is that the SFA failed, and it failed Rangers in its hour of need over Craig White, and it failed Scottish football.
We didn't fail, we complied.
Well, you didn't do anything. You said you didn't do anything.
We complied with the current processes within our articles. That said, I think there are a number of learnings, and I think the same goes for football right across the globe. People are coming into football, into a multi-million-pound business, and I think football needs to take a harder look at what could be done differently. We are currently exploring the possibility of carrying out due diligence using the outgoing regime to make sure that there's a full and rigorous set of research done before the transaction is allowed to go ahead.
Do you feel the need to apologise to Rangers fans?
I don't need to apologise because we've complied with our articles. I don't think there's a need to apologise whatsoever. I think Craig White has...
You need some new articles then, don't you?
Well, I think the articles...
Well, let's unpack this. You say there's no need to apologise because we follow the rule book, so that's all right. Well, you must therefore admit you need a new rule book.
No, I think it's easy at times to try and look around and find a scapegoat and try and point fingers at where blame is to be apportioned. I think perhaps it might be worth looking at the previous regime who for 4 years, when they said they were selling the club, said that they would sell it and act in the best interests of the club. With that in mind, I think the previous regime also have to take some responsibility for selling that club and looking after so-called shareholders of Rangers Football Club and those people that have put money into the club over the years. Because the Scottish FA, as I said, have a process. That process has been in place for some time. It's worked very, very well until now. I think there are learnings, undoubtedly. And as I said, we will review where we can tighten up, as I know is happening right across the game right now.
Let's move on to the EBTs. Did nobody question EBTs in the Scottish game, in the English game, come to that, simply because nobody thought they were illegal in any way? And indeed, they're not illegal in any way if operated correctly. Is it as simple as that?
There is nothing wrong with EBTs when used correctly. EBTs are a way of providing benefits to employees, and if managed in a correct manner, are perfectly legitimate. I think that the issue that we know is under investigation at the moment by both HMRC as part of the large tax case and by the SPL as part of their own investigation into potential non-disclosure of side letters, is whether or not there has been any wrongdoing. And I think the issue at hand is that wrongdoing or potential wrongdoing has been discussed with HMRC for some time, for several years in fact. So we wouldn't get involved in anything that there is no wrongdoing taking place. And EBTs, as I said, are a legitimate way of doing business when used correctly.
But as the governing body, why didn't you say to Rangers, look, guys, I mean, this smells really bad. This looks bad. You look, and you've admitted that you've not paid your tax. We can't do this. We've got to be open and above board here. It looks bad.
Well, I think you've got to look at what is legal and above board. At the time, the club were in dispute with HMRC. There was a tax case ongoing. The new owner was in discussions with HMRC. In fact, he's made comments and the club have made comments to that effect. And because the amount was not crystallised under UEFA guidelines, whilst ever it's in dispute, it's not classed as being overdue. So you've got to separate out the licensing requirement, which is what the licensing committee did, from the tax that was owed to HMRC, which, as we know, is still ongoing.
Sometimes things can be within the rules, but from a PR point of view, from a moral point of view, I hate to introduce morality to football, but can be the wrong thing to do. You would accept that?
Well, I think football around the world is going through a difficult time. Clubs are in difficult financial circumstances, not just in Scotland. You look down into England and look at the clubs in administration at the moment, notably Portsmouth and Port Vale in recent times, and I think Plymouth as well again now. As far as that is concerned, that indicates that clubs are living from hand to mouth, and there are deals being done all the time with HMRC, payment plans being agreed. There's huge amounts of debt in football.
I'm just inviting you to accept that sometimes things can be within the rules, but just look bad because morally they are bad.
I think when taxes aren't paid, and VAT in particular, national insurance contribution, of course that's bad. I think we accept that. And we know that in the current regime, there is evidence to suggest that Rangers haven't paid their taxes even since Mr. White has took over the club. That's wrong. That's against the spirit of the game, and certainly we would look to deal with that and stamp out that type of behaviour, which is not acting with integrity.